Hello, fellow book lovers. Welcome back to another YouTube video. I am going to be talking about my December TBR today. So I already talked a little bit about my December TBR because I did a sort of end of the year TBR in my video that I believe is called something like, Can I Finish My Reading Goals of 2025? So I did mention all these books in that video. So for that reason, I'm going to keep it short and sweet, or at least I'm going to try. That is not my strong point, so let's get into it right away. Oh, one more thing I do want to mention, this is going to be my first and last TBR video ever. And that is also kind of why I wanted to make it, because I thought it would be fun to at least make a TBR video at some point. But I actually will not be making TBR videos in the next year because I won't be making any TBRs in the next year. I have decided that monthly TBRs are something I am going to part with because I do feel like they force me into reading books that I'm not in the mood for. And the more that I think about this, the more I am genuinely so excited for the new year, because I think reading will feel less like a task and more like a hobby, which it is, so it should feel like that. So no more monthly TBRs. I am gonna still do a 2026 TBR, and that video will be coming up sometime soon, and I still will be doing seasonal TBRs. Another thing I forgot to mention, happy BOOKMAS, because I am very ambitiously because I just started this channel, but it sounds so fun. I'm going to participate in BOOKMAS. I am not going to post every day because that seems super impossible. So much respect to anyone who does that, but I will be doing the same thing I think a few other booktubers on here are doing, which is posting every other day. So there will be 12 videos in total. So I'm going to be posting every other day. So on the 1st of December, I'm going to post this video. And then on the 3rd, I'm going to post. On the 5th, I'm going to post. And then all the way up until Christmas. So I'm quite excited about that. I think it's going to be a ton of work, a lot of filming, a lot of editing, but I do think it's going to be fun. Okay, I just saw my camera for a sec because I was sitting so close to the screen that I was like adjusting my posture accordingly, and that's not good. So, that's that. Let's get into the TBR of December. The first book on my TBR for December is A Clash of Kings. This is the second book in A Song of Ice and Fire, but more generally known as A Game of Thrones. This was actually also on my November TBR because I really thought I would finish it in November, but I am, I think, a little less than 100 pages from the end of the book. So I did move it from my November TBR onto my December TBR. I feel like I've mentioned this 100 times by now, but in case this might be the first video of me that you are watching, I am reading this with my boyfriend. So that is also, I think, the reason that it is moved onto my December TBR, because it is a lot harder to binge this book, what I would do with other books, especially at the end of the month. If I had it on my TBR for that month and I had less than 100 pages left, I would maybe just binge it in the night or something like that. But for this book, I have to read out loud, which is something that I can do for less long of a time in a row than I can for books that you're just reading to yourself. Because initially we read to each other, so he would read a chapter and I would read a chapter and we would go back and forth. But then I started struggling so much because this is actually a really difficult read. I feel like maybe if you're a high fantasy reader, it's not that hard. I don't know, it might be. But for me, coming from romantasy, this is quite a difficult read. It's not even the world building, to be honest. He uses a lot of words that I do not no. And he does a lot of name dropping, a lot of name dropping. So places in the world, but also characters. A lot of characters that are completely unimportant are mentioned by name, which I feel like is very different from most other fantasy books that I've read so far, because often a side character, or not even a side character, but like a character that appears like twice, like a background character in other books will just be called like, oh, a squire or a stable boy. But George R. Martin calls them all by name. So sometimes a name is dropped. And I'm like, how did I forget about this person? Who even is this? And then turns out he was literally just never mentioned before. And we just kind of have to remember every name to know when a name is new, if that makes any sense. So difficult book. And because of that, I found that I couldn't really follow it when I was listening. I generally find that I can't really listen to fantasy often. Fantasy is still relatively new to me, and so a lot of words are unfamiliar. So yeah, I generally feel like I can't really listen to fantasy books on audiobook, for example, and I noticed the same happening with the chapters that my boyfriend was reading to me from A Game of Thrones. I would just get so frustrated because I just didn't understand. And I would ask him like, okay, you read that sentence again. And then at the end of the chapter, I'd be like, I didn't understand it. And then he would have to explain to me. And so it was a whole thing. And then I said, would you mind if I read the chapters? Because I just generally cannot follow at this point. And then he said, yeah, of course. So I'm reading the whole book to him now, but that does mean that I cannot just binge 150 pages in one day, because reading aloud for 150 pages is really, really different from reading in your mind for 150 pages. So anyway, that is a Clash of Kings, which, by the way, I don't even think I mentioned this, I am really enjoying. So the name dropping thing was sort of a critique point, I guess, but not like, it doesn't mean I'm not enjoying the story. So that's A Clash of Kings. Next up is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This is the author of Normal People. I think that's her most popular book, and she came out with Intermezzo last year, I think. This book is about two brothers, and they're both grieving their father. I think they kind of grew apart over the years. They're definitely two very different characters, and I think it is about their bond as brothers. Honestly, I don't know anything else. I'm going in quite blind, but I think this is also just generally what's in the synopsis. I'm quite excited about this. I read Normal People by the same author, and I really enjoyed it. I know some people are not a big fan of her writing style, but I actually liked it, so yeah, quite excited about Intermezzo. One strange thing that I did is I bought this book in Dutch last year, and I can't for the life of me remember why I did that. I think I was afraid that the book would be too complicated for me to read in English, because she has a bit more of a complex writing style. But now that I'm thinking about it, I read Normal People and I liked that, and I didn't think that was too difficult. So why did the sound of my, okay, you probably can't hear, but the sound of my ambiance video just turned on randomly, because I put it on mute and it just randomly is making sound again. So let me turn that off. Yeah, so I really don't know why I thought I would want to read this in Dutch. Generally, I don't read translations. I will read Dutch books if they're published in Dutch, but I haven't honestly for like 4 years maybe. Yeah, I think something like that. So I'm actually really curious how I will find reading in Dutch again. I've read children's books in Dutch because I am in my non-online life, studying to be a primary school teacher, so reading children's book is part of the job, and I read those in Dutch, but I do feel like that's different. So I'm very curious how I will experience reading Intermezzo in Dutch, and I'm specifically curious if I will read faster, because I do have a theory that I will actually read faster. I think I'm quite a slow reader, but then again, I read in a language that is not my mother tongue, so I think maybe that is the reason why I read a little bit slower. I would say I'm fluent. To be honest, I think I've been talking English, listening to English, online, reading English, but also I had a lot of English friends and people in my life. So for years, I spoke so much English that I do feel like I understand the language and I can speak the language fluently, but still it is not the same, and it will probably never be the same compared to if you grew up with it from birth. So yeah, I am curious, and I will report back on this little experiment if I read Intermezzo faster in Dutch. I'll probably not do something like this again though, because I generally want to read books in the language that they were written in. That's Intermezzo. Next up is These Violent Delights by Mika Niemerever or something like that. There is actually a fantasy book with the exact same title, but this is not a fantasy book. So this is a dark academia kind of setting. It takes place in the early 1970s Pittsburgh on a university, I'm pretty sure, and it is about a friendship. I think it turns into a relationship or like a sort of affair between two characters, Paul and Julian. Paul is our main character, and he becomes a little bit obsessed, I think, with Julian and like very much admires Julian. And I think Julian is a bit of a unkind person. Yeah, it does say Julian is also volatile and capriciously cruel. And Paul becomes increasingly afraid that he will never live up to what Julian expects of him. So this is about a relationship between two boys at university. Honestly, did I make that up? Is it on at a university? Yeah, okay, it is. I didn't see the words. I was like, did I completely make that up? But no, I did not. So this is about Paul and Julian, two boys at university, and their relationship, which turns obsessive, I think. And I am quite curious. It says, These Final Delights is an exquisitely plotted excavation of the depths of human desire and the darkness it can bring forth in us. So this is super intriguing to me. I love a dark academia setting. I love themes of love, especially when it explores the more, I mean, not necessarily dark sides, but like the more complex sides of it. I'm not a big fan of a rom-com, let's say, but I am a big fan of love stories like this, where it kind of blurs the lines between what's good and bad. I'm hoping for some morally great characters, so I am very, very excited about this one. I think this might be the most highly anticipated of the books on my December TBR. So that was These Violent Delights. Then we have Two Twisted Crowns, which is the sequel to One Dark Window, and this is the second part in the duology. So this is the last part in the series. Honestly, I am not super excited about this one, and I don't know why. Like, I liked One Dark Window. I didn't love One Dark Window, but I liked it, and I feel like I will probably like this as well then. But I just have not really been super excited to pick it up, but I also wanted to put it on my December TBR because I feel like if I don't pick it up now, I probably won't pick it up later. I think there were just a few things in One Dark Window that I didn't really love, mainly the romance. I just couldn't feel the connection between our two love interests. But yeah, I'll probably be getting to it, so it is on the list. There's also Beautiful Boy by David Sheff. It says also a father's journey through his son's addiction. This is a non-fiction story. This is the story of David Sheff himself and about his relationship with his son and him dealing with his son's drug addiction. So I think this is a very heavy read. I don't mind a heavy read. I think they are usually the books that impact me the most and the book that I end up loving most. So I am excited about this in a weird way. It feels weird to say I'm excited about reading a true story about a father dealing with his son's drug addiction. That is obviously a very heavy topic and not something that evokes excitement, but I do think this is going to be very touching and very powerful read, if that makes sense. So this is something I'm definitely going to be getting to in the month of December. That's Beautiful Boy. Another heavy read. I really want to make myself cry this month, I guess. This is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which is actually not a very big book. This is like 230 pages, and I just slightly spoiled myself. Why did I do that? I feel like I do this often where I want to know how many pages the book has, and almost never does it go wrong. Because sometimes I see like one word, and how much can one word spoil a book? Well, that, as it turns out, depends on the word. I mean, it could be in a completely different context, I suppose. Okay. Anyway, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. If you haven't heard about this, what this is about before, this is a classic and it is known to be quite a heavy read because it deals with depression and also, I'm pretty sure it deals with her struggling to maybe end her own life. So that is definitely very, very heavy. I know a lot of people love this. I want to read it. I want to know what the hype is about, I guess. And another reason I'm quite interested in this is I read a book maybe 5 or 6 years ago that was about Sylvia Plath and her husband, Ted Hughes. I don't know how to pronounce that. And that was a fictional story, but based on a lot of research. So it was kind of like a speculation of what their life might have looked like. And I thought that was super interesting, and it made me more interested to see her work. So, and The Bell Jar is her only novel. So definitely want to read The Bell Jar. I feel like I have hardly said anything about what this book is about, actually. Yeah, it takes place in the 1950s, and it says The Bell Jar has been celebrated for its darkly funny and razor-sharp portrait of 1950s society, and it is also partially based on Plath's own life. And it is about Esther Greenwood, who wins an internship on a New York fashion magazine, and she is believing she will finally realize her dream to become a writer. But in between the cocktail parties and piles of manuscripts, Esther's life begins to slide out of control. She finds herself spiraling into depression and eventually, like I said, an attempt, I'm not sure if I can say that word without YouTube like banning my video, so I'm not going to say it just in case. As she grapples with difficult relationships and a society which refuses to take women's aspirations seriously. That sounds like it's going to be a little bit about feminism as well, which I think is super interesting, especially the feminism in the 1950s and like the early first wave, second wave feminism. That really interests me. So yeah, I definitely will be getting to this. So that is The Bell Jar. Next up is a poetry book. This is A Jar by Corey Jane Spalding. I got to know this author because she came up in my For You page and she makes videos in which she reads her own poetry aloud, and it's a lot like spoken word kind of thing. And I really liked her videos. They're very emotional. They very focus on a young girl or young woman's perspective. A lot of it is about love, but a lot of it is about more societal issues as well. And then they mean things like feminism and like womanhood and insecurities, social media, things like that. So it is definitely focused very much on young women, young girls. This is her first 2 poetry books, or I think the only 2 poetry books that she has out, which are Open Wounds and Books Close, and they have been published together in this sort of combo version, which is called A Jar. And here comes the difficult thing, because I put Books Close on my 2025 TBR and also on my fall TBR. But then I ended up picking up the combo book. I feel like there should be a word for this and I just can't think of it, but this combo book, I will call it. And now I'm a little bit torn because I want to read Books Close, and I thought this was going to be like, oh, Books Close, and then like a sort of new chapter sort of thing where it said, oh, book 2, Open Wounds, and then you can continue into Open Wounds. But I think what she did is she mixed up the poems thematically or something like that. It definitely doesn't say, oh, this is where Books Close ends and this is where Open Wounds begins. So I don't know how I'm gonna read just Books Close. So what I think I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna read the whole book and then log it on Goodreads and in my reading journal as 2 separate books. Which, is that cheating? I don't think so, because I could have bought the book separately and they are published originally as 2 books. So I will just say this is 2 books. So yeah, that's that. I guess that's what I will say about A Jar by Corey Jane Spalding. And then the last book on my December TBR is Time of Your Life by Jessa Hastings. This is super highly anticipated for me. I love Jessa Hastings' writing style so much. I have the whole Magnolia Parks Daisy Hates series on my shelves. Absolutely love them. I gave most of them like 4, 4.5 or 5-star ratings. And then I also have The Conditions of Will, which I gave a 4.75. I am super excited about Time of Your Life. The only thing is I've heard not that many good things about it, so I am a little bit, I don't know if I'm hesitant, because actually I read, I think, the first 3 sentences or something when I was browsing the bookstore, and I was already hooked. So I'm not that worried, but also I feel like a lot of people that loved her other books didn't like this one. So who knows? We'll just find out. Time of Your Life is about two main characters that are both famous. It takes place in 1995, and our main girl is famous for nothing. I think she's kind of like a just it girl kind of situation. And our main guy is, I think, the lead singer of a very, very popular band, and they fall in love. It is very much insta love, which honestly, I don't mind that, especially not when you go into the book expecting insta love. I feel like it is definitely excusable if it is part of the plot. That's what the book is about. The book is about them falling head over heels from the first moment, and then about the mess that it creates. I think it is a very toxic relationship, at least that's the vibe it gives off if I read the synopsis, and it gives Magnolia and BJ, to be completely honest. But I don't mind that. If it is a complete ripoff of her own other book, I'll take it. I'll take it. I want more. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. It's just giving Magnolia at Parks 2.0. So that was Time of Your Life by Jessa Hastings, which, as you can see by the fact that it's been up here in the screen instead of in my hands, I still need to pick it up. I do have it on my e-reader, and I think I will just start reading it on my e-reader. Then if I like it, I will pick up the physical copy while I'm in the middle, so I can finish it in the physical copy. So that was Time of Your Life by Jessa Hastings, the 8th and final book on my December TBR. So 8 books in total, slightly ambitious, but I did just read 8 books in the month of November, and I've done it once before in April, I believe. So it is possible. And honestly, I will just see. If I finish them, great. If I don't finish them, it is not the end of the world. So that was my December TBR. I definitely will be trying to stick to it as closely as possible. And that was the last ever TBR video you will see me make, because me and monthly TBRs are over. We're breaking up. It's done. We are never ever getting back together. Okay, sorry about that. I will stop rambling. I will leave you to your other BOOKMAS videos you gotta watch. It's so exciting. I will see you in 2 days when I post my second BOOKMAS video. Bye!